jumping on trends, it's a cheap way to get a lot of views and get a lot of followers, but it's not going to lead to substance or paying clients. They're there just for the trend, right?
Our guest today is a content creator, online marketing coach, and a former startup co-founder. In 2 years, he went from 0 followers online to over 250K. I'd say he's mastered Instagram and on multiple occasions because of all the pivots from image to video and all that stuff. Also crushing it on TikTok, and he's begun rapidly building an audience on Twitter as well. And little known fact, maybe even you don't know this about yourself, you're also a 3-time bullfighting world champion. Welcome in, Steven Mellor. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. Thank you for the intro. I'm glad to be here.
I'm not sure that last part's true. You'll have
No.
Yeah, okay. All right. My research is wrong. So I want to start out by really just taking us to the moment right before you initially started creating content. Where were you at in your life right before you started creating, and what were you thinking about at that time?
So it all started, I guess, in April of 2019, and I had just got to a new startup. I left my old startup. Wasn't really happy with how things ended. And so I was kind of thinking I wanted to build my own brand, but I didn't know where to start. And I wanted to guard myself from like messy startup divorces. And so I wanted to build my own thing, right? So I started posting content specifically around like UX and app designs and UI in April of 2019.
What was it that prompted you then at that point to create? Did you go more all in, like I'm going heavy on quantity? Did you go more on heavy quality? What was your approach in the beginning?
So it just started out as sharing my passion. So the previous startup I was in a fantasy sports startup. And everything was high paced, like go. And I needed an outlet for my creativity because everything was structured in that startup. Like we had to get certain things done and met. So I just wanted a place to share my designs and share my UI flows and get questions and start, chatting with people. I didn't really have a goal of, okay, well, I'm going to do this so structured and get to 10K. It was just put out a piece of content, right? And I did that day over day over day. And then after, I think 2 months, I had 10,000 followers on Instagram.
2 months? Man.
2 months. It started quick.
Sure. It's been, 10 years now that I've tried, and I can't crack 200. So that's impressive for anybody listening here on any platform, but especially Instagram.
I think I caught lightning in a bottle, though, because at that time, UX on Instagram was very hot. I know a good friend of mine, Michael Jan, was blowing up, and there was a lot of people in that space. So I was like, well, I know this space, and let me get into it a little bit. So I started posting, and it just took off.
You said that it was lightning in a bottle, took off quick, but maybe could you take me back to some of the mistakes you think you were making? Looking back on it now, what were you doing wrong?
Do you want April 2019, where I tried 100 different theories and they all crashed and burned, or do you want everything I did from
Let's start
April
pre. That sounds interesting. Okay. Yeah.
So the original account, this account that I have right now, had like 3,000 followers, but I literally made bots that would go and move my mouse and click follow, click unfollow. And that got me a whole bunch of spam accounts. Had to trash that. Use like Python scripts, that trashed. So all those, even the apps you get in the App Store, none of those really work. So all those failed strategies just to get to 3,000 didn't mean anything because I ended up wiping all of those people clean and just deleting all the followers. But what worked was getting really focused on what niche I want to go into, right? Only talking about UX. And I didn't know all this back then, but I just kept posting one image and using the UX hashtags and all those groups. And it just kept me involved in that community. So every time I'd open it up and I'd get a few likes, I'd get 10 likes. It would get that dopamine going, and I'd go comment and look at those people and just start building a small community that way.
Well, for this episode, I would love to dive into growth a lot, but we're going to start more on the ideation side and really stay there for the bulk of this, because I think for somebody that has really gone after multiple platforms, you have to have a solid idea of how to generate ideas, how to cultivate them, and what to use, what not to use. I want to pick your brain on this and get a full course out of you, basically, in this podcast. Okay. Let's start more on where ideas do not come from. So Creative block. Why do you think that happens, and how often does creative block happen to you? Is that something that still happens, or have you found your way around it?
No, it still happens. And usually now when it happens, I notice it. And it's because I'm trying to be too perfect with my content or trying to look at the vanity metrics of, oh, this post has to go viral. This post has to really hit. That's where I get in trouble with content blocks. Creating content and coming up with ideas. If you're not niche focused and you don't have your content pillars, you don't have sort of the high level structure, you don't know the problems and solutions of the industry, you're trying to fake it till you make it, that's where you run into a lot of these issues. But if you do the basics and understand, who you're making content for, sort of what lane you want to play in a particular field, you'll be okay. You can keep coming back to the well. And I think one of the best tips I got before was just recycling content. It's you keep the same 5 or 6 big content pillars, and under that you might have a ton of topics, but you keep recycling those and keep talking about those because people will go through your post and forget about it in 2 months. So you could always keep resurfacing that content.
Now, when you're talking about repurposing, we kind of know the Garyvee strategy, right? You got your video, and then you just break everything down from there as much as you can, break it into clips, go crazy with it, really. That works super well when you have a big team. I'm assuming, yes. Are you still a one-man show?
I am. I just added one person to my team. So I went from a solopreneur to a +1. But that way of big block topic, that big meta topic, and then breaking everything down, actually, as a solo creator, gives me a lot of anxiety because it makes me think of, I have to create this big topic and I got to put out a podcast or YouTube video. And then how am I going to clip it all up, right? I usually worked under the mode of one post one day. And if I can get a day or two ahead, which is still what I do now, then all the better, right? Like I'm still creating content for tomorrow and Sunday.
Yeah. What role has format played in all this? Because you started really heavy on Instagram, which is not the same platform now that it was back then. I know you used to do, I'm talking about Mike Janda, a lot of these other UXers, a lot of carousels back in the day, super good. I mean, I still see some of that stuff, but let's be honest, it's TikTok now. It's all reels. So that's really where it's going. So what role has format played in your ability to generate ideas? And has that made it kind of fun for you to keep going, or has it just been kind of annoying that the format keeps changing?
No, so yes, it has been annoying because you constantly have to adapt. But I think adaptation is good. Keeping up with what the users want or what they're enjoying. Carousels definitely were a huge part of the game when I first started growing. I think I did a carousel a day, and that was really what propped me up and kept the growth going. I think 2020, 2021, I started experimenting with Reels when they came out, but I wasn't using them consistently. And even the single screenshots of tweets and posting those became part of my workflow when I had my new son, right? So my new son came into the world. I didn't have a ton of time to put towards content creation. So it's like, okay, what's easy? What can I get out there and still provide value? Where carousels took 2 hours to, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours to make, especially with all the planning and writing. Annoying, yes, but I think the way people consume content these days, everything's pushing way more video. And I think video, it brings out the authenticity of the user, where otherwise they could hide behind carousels, they could hide behind slides. They don't have to put their personality out there. When you're in video, it really hits home that you have to show up and, speak with authenticity and be correct about it.
Well, so we've talked so far about having pillars. Could you maybe just tell us what your pillars are? And then from there, I want to talk about how you bring them to life and reiterate them and actually come up with ideas. But what are those pillars for you?
So I'm shifting a little bit away or going above on Instagram growth. But right now it was sort of Instagram features, marketing topics, almost getting into that Russell Brunson where you teach the funnels and the marketing tactics behind it. Not shifting so much into like the Seth Godin world, but it's really marketing, Instagram growth, and I guess you could say short form video or video content, and teaching sort of the basic tactical steps on how you can get your stuff launched and get it visible.
From I don't know if your process has changed, if you feel like it's changed since you were doing more design and written with the carousels. Now you're doing more video. The way that you come up with ideas, is it pretty much the same, or have you had to adapt that as well?
So the ideation process is about the same. What really helped is my sketch videos, all my notebook stuff. I'm getting everything off my brain into a notebook. And sometimes they turn into sketches, sometimes they turn into actual videos. But being able to stack notebooks and just open them up and let loose and brainstorm on that. And it's funny because people start resonating with the sketches a lot more. And that's how my TikTok blew up. So I'm like, okay, well, let me lean into that. It sort of backed my way into that medium. But I mean, I think the overall process is the same. I have a whiteboard, I have the notes app on my phone, and any idea that I come up with, if I see somebody else who has a idea that I want to sort of talk about with my audience too, I use it for inspiration. I save it. I'll sort of reverse engineer it and see if I can come up with my own way of saying it.
That's one part of it then. So I imagine for someone like you that's been doing this for a while now, I would imagine that ideas that naturally come to you is a big part of it. They end up in your notepad, like you said, on your whiteboard. You can do with it what you will. Sometimes you got to do that proactive ideation as well, where you're actually trying to generate ideas out of nothing.
Yes.
They're not coming to you. Could you maybe walk through what that looks like for you and some of these different things that you use? Like, for example, I know people that use the content matrix. Like Justin Welsh uses the content matrix where you have your topics on one side, rows across the right are like emotions you want to hit on or formats, and then you just match them up. Do you use anything like that or anything totally different?
I try to keep it simple for Instagram because everything is so short. It's usually just problem solution in my niche. So I'll write down a list of all of the problems or frustrations that people have attacking a specific topic. And then, okay, what are the solutions of those? Can I turn those into content? So it's really like a 2-column process. And that comes up with a ton of ideas. But if I see the other part is trending stories, trending information, Mosseri drops a lot of information, so I got to react to that. So that plays a role. But a lot of it is looking at other platforms that creators use and seeing what topics are hitting for them. And maybe I could roll that into mine. So there's an app that I use or that I've used in the past called Popsters, and it analyzes all of somebody's YouTube top views, top rated videos. So you could actually sort them by views and engagement, and then you could look at the titles. And it's not that I'm taking those titles, but I can see what's hitting with that particular audience, and that goes into the brainstorming sort of flow and helps me come up with other ideas.
Yeah, I think that tracks with what I've kind of done and what everyone else there. Everyone has their own little way uniquely of doing it, right? Where you're intaking natural things that are happening. That's kind of part one. Part two, when you have to proactively generate ideas, when you see that your backlog it's not super strong, you have like a content matrix, or in your case, just kind of generating ideas based on problem to solution, which is super smart. Highly recommend that as well. I love that. And then the third part is using AI tools, other tools to try to help you generate ideas as well. It's kind of foolish not to let that at least help you a little bit of the time if you're just really stumped. And if you want to know what works, there are a lot of tools out there. So I think those are really 3 key pillars that I've found. So I'm glad that I'm not crazy and that other...
No. And there's one more too. It's actually leveraging Twitter. So my audience is a little bit different, but I've noticed if I talk about certain topics and put them out there on Twitter, the ones that get the most reactions, I end up turning into content for Instagram or TikTok. So it's sort of like a testing field to see what hits.
Well, let's go back a little bit. Talking about earlier on, I asked you what some of the mistakes you were making back then. Now that you've got some experience a lot of experience under your belt, you built things, you know how things work. Mostly, nobody can know perfectly because all these platforms
they'll never tell you.
But now that you have all that experience, looking at other people, you probably have a good eye for what they're probably missing out on or where their gaps are, what they're doing wrong. What's some of the common stuff you're seeing people doing in terms of the type of content, the ideas they're putting out to the world, or just creating content in general? What are people doing wrong according to you?
Big question. So I think either they're going too broad with what they want to talk about, and these platforms have so much noise on them right now that if you don't niche down, and you hear that a lot, but you have to niche down to get some initial traction, once you get past a certain phase, like in Instagram, if you get 10,000 followers, you can start letting that breathe a little bit, but you have to be hyper focused on what you're talking about to be known for that particular thing, not just for the human side, for the audience, but for the algorithm side, for them to push you in that direction. You can't be talking about 10 different topics and expect to get a ton of growth. You have to have, that one fine topic that you talk about over and over and over again to get the algorithm on your side to push your content out, to get more views, more reach, etc.
Have you ever personally consulted somebody where they were like in a totally different niche you knew nothing about, but you consulted them still?
I did, but I think I ended up refunding the guy. He was in music and dancing. And I'm like, I could give you general overview tips, but this is not going to be a good space for me to help you out because it's just not my space. And I'm not going to push people down a certain path or tell them to do things that are outside that community. Because all the stuff that I try to work with people who want to build personal brands or who have a brand and want to grow that, right? They have a brick and mortar store. They know how to do that, right? Those two areas I can work with. But I don't know, when you're trying to grow something that specific, like music and dancing, and I have nothing to do with it, it's hard for me to take that client.
The reason I ask this is because, one of the big questions is, should I do what I'm good at, or should I talk about what I love? And what you love may not necessarily be what you actually know super well. So an example of this would be, I love the NBA. I love basketball. I love the NFL. I love all this stuff. And I consider myself pretty knowledgeable for a lay person, but I've never been in a front office seeing all that stuff going down. I don't know what it's really like. So I may love it, but should I go all in on the NFL or the NBA, for example? Or should I talk marketing, which I like a lot, and I have a certain passion for it, but I have the passion for it more so because it's what I've really done and experienced and become good at.
Right.
So I'm curious your take on this argument. If you could only pick one, is it passion? Is it proficiency? Like where would you go? It sounds like you've gone more of the starting with UX. You did like what you were really good at, but maybe that was also your passion.
Yeah, so I've always been a designer. I have a degree in design and MBA in marketing. So it's like I like both sides. I like knowing the design side and getting my hands dirty, but I also like the numbers and the analytics. Another thing, so if I like software, I like building apps, but I'm nowhere near an expert. And that's a passion of mine. I can code for hours, but I will never be the guy to try to teach or grow a brand around coding. I like the fact that I have experience in marketing and design because it gives that authenticity, and I could actually reference real examples from it. I don't like the fake it till you make it type of thing.
Makes a lot of sense because you're not going to make compelling content unless it's compelling to you.
Yeah. Perfect.
Right. So I like that because there's always this temptation, like go reach for the stars, chase your dreams. Like that's cool, but it doesn't mean anything. It's not super helpful. Maybe you could start doing something that you're really good at and kind of like, and you could grow to love it or pivot somewhere adjacent where you really love it. But it may not be always the best advice to just go crazy after the thing that you love if you aren't very good at that thing also.
Yeah. I mean, the classic like ikigai or you try to find something that you love and you're good at, or you're good at and can pay well, right? Whatever that crossroad is.
What kind of stipulations you put on yourself for idea, if any? Maybe you don't. Do you want to have a certain backlog? Do you just do it day to day in terms of ideas that are in your pocket to use for the future? Are you more spontaneous or are you more planned out?
I'm spontaneous to a point, but I'm planned out to a point, if that makes sense. So I sort of have, I'm on both sides of the fence. Like I like to have my notebook and my notes of, okay, these are potential content ideas and these are potential things I can talk about and sort of high level structure them. But nothing is really batched longer than a couple days. I like being involved in the content creation process, and I don't like delegating all that work. It's too personal to me from a design perspective, and like putting my content out there that has my name on it. I don't want to just, write 10 bullets and give them to somebody to create content for me. That's just not my flow.
Do you believe in trend jacking, or do you believe in just sticking to what you want to create? what you think is valuable?
No, I think it's important to stay on top of like current events in your field. Like the CEO of Instagram talking about how they're going to push more into video. Yes, I should talk about that. But jumping on trends, it's a cheap way to get a lot of views and get a lot of followers, but it's not going to lead to substance or paying clients. They're there just for the trend, right? So I avoid that at all costs. I know some people do it to get cheap views and to grow quickly, especially on TikTok, but it's not something that I would recommend at all.
This brings me to the next point of this, where ideas, it's great to have a bunch of ideas, but knowing which ones are actually good and worth using is a totally different story, different part of this equation. What's your threshold for it? How often do you cut ideas out?
That is a great question. So, I mean, I think I come up with way too many ideas to begin with. And since I'm only doing a couple days ahead in content, it's easy to have a huge backlog of ideas. And I will just sort of look at the past 14 days, past 30 days and see what's hitting. I'll look at my insights and see what is really resonating with people. I'll sample something and put it out there. And if it doesn't do well, I'll delete it. I'm not ashamed of admitting that, but it's like you want the best content out there to educate, to teach, to push your industry forward. So I'll always be refining, but it's nice having, that huge backlog of ideas that I can just either cut or just keep adding to and keep adding fresh ideas to.
I know for me at least, I used to be like super spontaneous, especially on Twitter. I would post everything that came to my mind, and then I would wonder for 7 years why I wasn't growing. And then I eventually kind of built in this 24-hour rule for myself where every day I'd generate ideas. I'd try to go crazy brainstorming, put it all down, but I wouldn't let myself do anything with it for 24 hours. And quickly became very shocked at how many bad ideas I had that I thought were amazing the day before. And when you have that adrenaline going of generating ideas, that's one thing. If you publish all the time, sometimes you're going to hit gold there because the passion's there in that moment. But if you wait a day, at least in my experience, can just help you weed out a lot of things that are not nearly as strong as you thought they were.
I think I picked that tip up from you too. It's don't deviate from the topic you want to talk about. And there are times where when I write my tweets or whatever, I'm at the gym or whatever, that's when the ideas come. So I'll just build up a big queue and just start publishing. And it's the absolute wrong way to go. So I came across your post about that is like only stay in that particular field. Don't talk about things outside of it, which helped a lot. So it's interesting.
I appreciate it. Learning as I go. I am curious to hear about your definition of what a big idea looks like to you. Because there's some content where you just kind of know you're putting it out because it's repurposed maybe, or you're just trying to get a little juice out of it. But then you have other ideas that you think have huge potential. What are those ideas? Are there any commonalities in those ideas, elements of those that make you think this has a lot of potential? This could be a really cool idea. Do you have any like frameworks for how you determine what to really go all in on, what to make smaller, or is it just taking shots on goal?
I mean, a lot of it's just taking shots on goal. I know what topics work for like Instagram and talking about social media, anything around growth, or if you get a little bit higher up, it's talking about revenue, right? Products to revenue. Those always do well. The 0 to 10s, how I got my first 1,000 followers, how to grow 10,000 followers on Twitter, all those like growth topics that are high value in terms of vanity to people, those always do well. But I mean, a lot of it's just you get your shots up, you get your reps in, and you find out what works.
And along these lines too, like a video idea, it's going to be harder to execute sometimes. Maybe it's easier. Like with TikTok, it's more authentic, so sometimes you can get away with a very easy, low quality video and it's just funny or it works. But a lot of time video is more planned out because you're trying to like script it out first and then execute on it. And it can be a lot. Do you write your ideas for like a video separately than you would for a tweet? Or do you just come up with an idea and try to break it into as many pieces of content as possible?
Repurposing between types of mediums is huge for me. So I will take old carousels and make them reels. I think what really helped me initially with the video format is when they first started coming out, there were 15-second clips. So you have to understand how to create content that quick in terms of, okay, well, how can I make this an effective reel without just babbling, right? Or speaking way too fast, something that they can take away. And that really means like, it's a couple sentences, if that. It's a top 3 list. It's a, here are 3 apps that I like, right? Something simple. So when you start getting in that frame and you do that for 6 months before they roll out 30-second or 60-second reels, it sort of refines your process to be quick with it and quick with your points.
That makes sense. Yeah, I'm struggling with this. Like, I want to get into TikTok, but it just seems like even so much more effort than writing a tweet to me. And so
much more.
I don't feel like the ideas are one-to-one. Like, I could write 5 tweets easily. Making one TikTok, I have no idea. I mean, I haven't started yet, right? So that's the first step that I really should take, is just to start and fail fast, and then I'll learn quickly. But do you have any advice for people out there that are kind of like that, thinking, I've never come up with an idea for a TikTok video. How on earth would I even do that? And is it different than coming up with an idea for a tweet or a LinkedIn post?
Well, the funny thing about this too is people are actually taking tweets and using like B-roll footage and just, overlaying the tweet on top of the image for like 7 seconds, or they're copying the exact tweet and putting it on the screen. So there's an easy way to get started, and it's a cheap way to and quick way to make TikToks and make Instagram reels, and just to get your face out there and get started. But sticking with listicles is the easiest thing I've seen people do, because it provides value, provides quick wins. People can go check those out and download them. Or I think Alex from Alex and Books, he does a really good job of showing the books, showing the type of content he wants to put out there, and turns those into reels, but does the same thing with tweets. So I think it's trying to refine it down to like 1 point or something quick is tough, but it depends on sort of your niche and how much you're trying to teach in that little format.
Well, I have seen people use my tweets in TikToks, and that's what. So you're saying that, I'm like, I've seen them doing that and then getting like 10,000 likes off of a tweet that I wrote. I should be doing that for my own tweets.
You should, yes.
I have serious FOMO about that now. I should just
put it out there. You don't even have to show your face. You can just show like, I think there's a couple guys on Instagram who do this. They show abstract like countryside or like the beach, and they'll put a tweet over it. And they've built their whole brand around that, and they have 200,000 followers and get a ton of engagement off that.
Yeah, as a side note here, there's something about a screenshot of a tweet on every other platform that just performs well. I don't get it. I don't understand why that happened.
I had this talk with somebody else. I think it's psychological. So we're so conditioned to read a tweet, and a tweet is 130 characters or whatever it used to be. It's so micro that people see it and see the format and they go, oh, I'll just read this, because it's short form content, right? And so now it's coming into video and you're like, oh, let me just read this.
That's half of LinkedIn now. I scroll through LinkedIn, it's just tweet.
Because it's
untrue
I love
story,
Twitter.
Tweet.
I love Twitter. It's so easy to get your ideas out there and use that as your testing platform, at least for me.
Yes.
Test all the content out there and see if it gets 0 likes or if it gets 10 likes, 15 likes. It's like, okay, that has potential. Let me see if it'll work elsewhere.
We're completely aligned here. Initially, when I started getting Twitter really rolling, I was just tweeting. And then I realized, wait, this is the ultimate validation platform. I can just see if an idea is strong at its base level and then expand from there. Took that, applied that to threads, longer form content, LinkedIn posts, podcasting. Didn't really apply to TikTok yet, so that's on me. But it's such an easy way to get going. Like, test your ideas out in short form, as minimal effort as possible, and then expand to something that's going to take you more time because you have more idea of what's going to work.
2 funny stories about Twitter. So my friend Tom, Bonus Footage, he actually reads tweets on his, like he'll hold his phone up and just read it for a TikTok or a reel, and it does really well. He did that with one of mine. But one of my best performing pieces of content on Instagram was a Twitter thread. I wrote it in the parking lot of a hospital while my wife was going to get an appointment taken care of. And so I just wrote the tweet, and then I just screenshotted it, put it on Instagram, and it blew up. It was my best performing, piece of content.
It's insane. I need to do more of that because I've already got the tweets. I just need to put it out there. Lesson to everybody else, if you have any platform where you're particularly good or have some kind of momentum, or even not, you just have content there, repurpose that. That's like step one for ideas. The more that you're publishing and putting things out there, the more you're likely to get comments that give you ideas for new content. Like I've gotten on my tweets replies all the time. Well, what about this part of it? Okay, cool. You just gave me a new thread. I'll just go ahead and write that now. And that's a valuable way to close that content feedback loop as well. Getting those replies in, creating new content, and just keeping it rolling. So that's an easy way. It's easier said than done for sure. I think Steven knows better than anybody that this is not easy to do. It's not easy coming up with ideas. It's not easy, especially executing on them and getting them out there and then doing it on a consistent basis. It's really hard. But that's kind of the blueprint. Tell me if I'm wrong.
No, you're right. And I was just going to add on to that because I use the comments in my own content to make new content. And I think that's one of the easiest hacks you can do because your audience is telling you what they want to hear and what they want to see. So if you put out the right content and have a nice call to action at the end to say, hey, what do you think about this? Or would you use this? Or why wouldn't you use this? It sort of prompts those ideas and gets people engaged in your content. And then you just use their stuff, their comments as, put that on your list and make that content for future.
For sure. Well, I want to do a little thought experiment, but before that, I want to do like a mini one that's not
okay.
as big. I didn't warn you about this one.
No.
Yeah, so I had brought up this point earlier or I'd asked you if you consulted someone where you just had no clue. So we won't dive into that example specifically, but if I were to just ask you, or let's say you get hit on the head and then you wake up in the morning and you have this newfound love for like gardening or something totally different that you hadn't before. We won't get into the specifics of generating ideas for that or anything, but let's just say you just woke up with this totally new interest, but you knew that you had a lot of work to do to research it and be able to create. What would be some of the steps that you would take to become really familiar? Like where would be the places you would look to learn about that topic, maybe more in depth than just Wikipedia? What would you search for? What would you try to learn so that you'd feel at least pretty comfortable posting some really basic stuff about that topic?
I think I would start at YouTube and I would try to find the best creators in that field. Say it's gardening. I really know nothing about gardening. Can't plant grass to save my life. So I think looking at that, YouTube's first, go find, who has the best how-to videos, who has the most likes, most views, start breaking it down that way. Look at their past stuff in terms of what got the most views, most engagement, and just start the ball rolling from there. But I think anytime you can get into looking at peers who have done this and have built the audience and built the sort of name brand behind that particular niche and just study them and study what works and what doesn't work, that's the best starting block.
I love it. I think YouTube is probably the best search engine out there.
Mm-hmm.
TikTok's getting there. The search isn't like amazing, but if you're searching for a how-to, you can usually find something pretty decent on TikTok as well. And
I'll give you a real life example. So I play hockey. Men's league is just a beer league. But I didn't grow up playing, competitive organized hockey. So there's things I lack. I still can hold my own, but I want to know how to, do certain cuts or take a shot a certain way or how to skate faster. I'm on YouTube every night just looking at these drills, right? How to improve my stick handling, how to do this. So I look to those guys when I don't know anything and just study, and then apply it.
Well, let's do this for something that you know a little bit more about. So we'll do personal branding because you know a lot about this. You've done this for a long time for yourself now. So you're starting a new brand. Let's say even an anonymous brand, so it's not attached to your name. Can't use any of your current resources or anything like that. Totally new brand, and it's all about personal branding. So maybe your account is like the personal brand wizard or something. We've seen all those anonymous accounts out there.
Wiz.
Your goal is you actually want to start maybe with something more heavy as a content pillar. So you're going to use video podcast, video channel as maybe your main channel, and then you're going to break it all down from there. So from there, you're going to create Instagrams, TikToks, tweets, things like that. And you can use your own process that you've talked about as well. But if I were coming to you and saying, cool, this sounds like a cool idea, how do you plan on coming up with the first month's worth of content for the bigger pillar? So like the video podcast, what would you think of immediately would you go more, I'm going to start with basics, or would you just go right into advanced topics? Since this is something you know a lot about, where would you go in terms of the ideas you'd want to execute on for that first?
So I think everything comes down to reps. So I don't think going big and trying to hit a grand slam right out the gate. I would try to solve a series of quick wins and get people in the door first and get them some victories right up front. So whatever that is in personal branding, even something as, a logo and a color scheme, or finding out sort of how they want to position themselves in the market. What are 10 competitors they can go research? How can I start solving those little problems for people? Because I think it's all about the quick wins and providing a little bit of entertainment in doing that too. Does that answer it, or start to answer it?
Yeah, for sure. Would you have would you start with a big list and then narrow in from there? Or would you just say, okay, we're going to get the quick wins. Here are the 3 things that I think are the most important. We're going to execute on that, and then we'll go from there. We'll just kind of see.
Yeah, no, I think it all comes down to consistency too, because I'm trying to think of this in terms of not knowing what I know now, but everything comes down to consistency. So if I can put out a series of, even if they're shorter 15-minute videos, instead of trying to go for this huge mega, big hitting video that covers a whole bunch of stuff, quick wins, keep the podcast shorter or keep the video podcast shorter, get people the information in and out, not waste their time, be punchy with it. I think that's exactly where I'd start.
Now, when you're talking about shorter, would you say like 5 minutes, 15 minutes? What's
yeah,
short
so I'm drawn to the 15-minute podcast, the 10-minute podcast. Andy Frisella used to put one on that was 15 minutes. And some of the longer ones, I just don't have time to sit through. So I work from home. I don't have a 75-minute commute. I can't watch or listen to the longer ones. So I find myself listening to part of them, right? So I've always been drawn towards these shorter, more tactical, impactful ones. And I think that makes the most sense for getting those quick wins right out the gate.
Yeah, you can still get a lot of micro content out of that. So let's shift a little bit to content that you repurpose, micro content from that. If you got a 15-minute pillar that you're putting out a couple times a week, let's say, just trying to get quick wins, talk about what you know, that's what the video podcast is. What stipulations or format would you put on, here's how many TikToks I'm going to try to get out of that, here's how many tweets? Would you think of it that way, or would you just edit ruthlessly through it and then whatever you get, you get?
I wouldn't put an exact number on it, but there has to be a few gems you can pull from a 15-minute podcast. I like to work in the framework of 3s and 4s. So if I was doing a 15-minute podcast, I'd want to solve 3 or 4 little micro wins. So that's where I'd start and try to get those out of it. If there's 2, cool. If there's 6, even better. But I'd try to get, probably 3 clips that I could pull from that 15-minute episode.
So let's do the math. Let's say you're doing 2 of those 15-minute sessions per week. If you get 3 TikToks from that, that's 12 TikToks. Or no, sorry, that's 6 TikToks per week that you're getting from it. On top of maybe 3 tweets, maybe a LinkedIn post if you want to do that, whatever. So you're getting a decent amount of return on your investment. You're probably getting 12 to 18, even maybe up to 24 posts for different channels per week. So that's a good place to start. And I think that is really nice at highlighting that even if you're doing smaller content, you don't have to go all out and take these big shots like you just mentioned. If you start with what you know, do 15 minutes, don't go crazy, you can still get a decent amount. I would like to know the amount of people that are putting 24 or more pieces of content out there right now in the world. It's probably a small percentage. So
I was going to say you have to have a team for that. I mean, Garyvee talks about that overall. Big piece, break it down into 180 pieces of content. I could never do that. That stresses me out.
Yeah.
You have 3 of those 15 minutes a week. You get 9 TikToks, 9 videos out of that. You have to come up with 1 on your own. You have 10 pieces of content. That's almost 2 weeks, because I only recommend posting once a day. And I know there are other people out there. You got to post 6 to 9 TikToks a day. You're going to burn yourself out. You'll learn quickly, but you're going to burn yourself out in the first month, right? In my entire career, I've only posted, a couple times a day, like 5 times. Everything else has been once a day.
And for most platforms, that's pretty much the standard, right? The only one that doesn't apply is Twitter. But with Twitter, you do have the built-in, you can be a little more nuts on that platform. So,
Right.
Tweet 5 times if you want to, or less. But with the Garyvee thing, again, that goes back to the idea of quantity versus quality. He's got some quality in there, but he's got a crew as well. But overall, if you look at the depth of somebody that's writing a Twitter thread, which Garyvee is never going to do Twitter threads because it's too much time, not high enough leverage, high enough leverage for Garyvee. You're kind of going more towards the quality side if you take the longer form approach, and that's okay, especially if you're staying solo. That's probably what you need to do. Building up a portfolio of really high quality things over time eventually does come out to a massive quantity of content that you have. If you post every day on Instagram for an entire year, 365 posts is a lot of posts. That's a lot more than most people have. And especially if you're trying to maximize each one and giving yourself an hour or 2 hours per day to think on that idea, I think that's a powerful thing that's come out of this session as well, because there is this idea out there that you should be going crazy as much as you can, creating as much as you can. That's really only going to work for people with a team or with the money to do that. And if you want to do solo, you're probably going to have to try to find that balance. And
so,
yeah.
I was going to jump in here because there's a couple Instagram experts who are 24 years old. They out of college. They don't have their main gigs, like being on Instagram or Twitter is their main thing, right? That's their job. And they're telling people to post 5 times a day. And I respect the hustle, but I'm a dad with 2 kids and 11-month at home.
Yeah.
I had a startup that I was running, and I do everything from 9 p.m. to 1 a.m. So when you look at that, how tight that is, and I have to create a TikTok, I have to create a reel or a carousel, and eat and go to bed, you're talking, I can maybe get 1 out a day.
Right. Same here. 3 kids. There's no way. I would die if I tried to do more than I'm doing now, and that's okay. You got to think. One thing that the Garyvee strategy is really good at is also thinking about the long term. I don't think that he cares too much about the engagement side of things as much as just creating, which there's some flaws to that. You still want to analyze what you're doing. You want to get better and improve the message and what people actually want to consume. But if you take the zoomed out approach and say 1 piece of content a day over the course of 10 years, wow, I've got what is that, 30 or 3,000, 4,000 pieces of content almost? It's a lot. That's a lot you can put together. And especially if you're making the most out of it, it's a strong way to go. So if you're somebody listening to this podcast right now and you're like, oh, I'll never be able to even start because I've got to be on TikTok and I've got to be on Twitter and YouTube and all these channels at the same time, I would encourage you to think the opposite and say, what do I want to do most? If you want to do TikTok videos, that's the funnest thing for you. Start there, get really good at it, put something out on a daily basis if you can, and make it better and better and better as you go along. Try to look at those signals and pay attention to that. But trying to do everything at once, usually you can talk to this maybe a little bit, but in my experience, trying to do everything at once pretty much means you're growing nowhere. When I zeroed in on Twitter, I grew on Twitter because I just started learning really quickly what actually worked. And the context is not the same across platforms.
I echo that completely because I tell people focus on one platform, get scale, and then you have the leverage and the flexibility to scale elsewhere, right? You'll learn this platform so much quicker. In my terms, it's Instagram. That's all I did. I didn't have TikTok until I didn't really even play with it until 2021. So that's a year and a half after I started growing on Instagram. So even Twitter, I just didn't think of it as a growth channel. I thought of it as a content creation piece, almost like a mini Photoshop. Like I'll just go here and screenshot it and perfect, I'm done. There was no thought process behind, okay, I'm going to do this to grow Twitter. It's no, I'm going to use this because it's a format people like to see on Instagram. So focus on one platform.
That's a strong place to end. I think we've gone through a lot of really succinct, very nice ideas around idea generation and what content really should be setting the foundation here. So I appreciate you having you on. I want to give you a bit of a platform here just really quickly to talk about, give a quick bio, talk about what you're working on, whatever you want to say right now. The platform's yours, but I'll turn the time over to you and then we'll close things out.
Cool. I'll just keep it brief to like 30 or 60 seconds. So Instagram growth, anything around growing your audience and launching your digital products. If you want to learn more about this, I have some freebies in my Instagram at the Steven Mellor. You can go grab those. I also have an Instagram course that you can grab as well.
That was like 20 seconds. You're spot on. All right, cool.
I keep it quick.
Steve, again, thank you for coming on. Good luck in your hockey league. And are you going to be doing more bullfighting anytime soon? Or have you hung up the Matador cape?
No bullfighting. No, none for me. I hung that up.
I always like starting an interview with completely false information. It's a great way.
That's awesome.
Steven, again, thanks for hopping on. Follow him on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. He's well worth it. Super solid content creator. I learn a lot from you all the time. And you mentioned the sketches earlier on. I love that format. It's super easy to digest, so I highly recommend, especially on TikTok, checking out the sketches that he does, walking through funnels, content process. Really cool. Thanks again for coming on and teaching us about idea generation. And hope to talk again soon. We'll have to have you back on.
100%. This was great. Thank you so much.